Hello, everyone. We are back. Some of you were already a part of part one of this special broadcast. Stop approaching love blindfolded. So we just wrapped up the first segment, which went out to Apple TV, Amazon, Roku, all the above. And now we're taking it just to our private social platform. I say private. It's going out to the social platforms. It's not going out to the other big platforms. But we want to continue the conversation. I'm here with Jim Hetherington. He's a relationship expert. He's going to be celebrating his 40th wedding anniversary next May. So we're going to be hearing from him. And I'm going to bring Hailey back on, who's in her second marriage you do multiple things, but you do specialize in relationships. And you also you teach people how to be happy, I believe. And then through that happiness, that self-care, self-love, translate into a relationship. And then we're on an upward spiral and we're moving forward in a positive direction. So since we're coming back together, we just had a great episode here for part one. For those of you that were on episode part one, what did you learn? What came up for you? And I want to hear from Jim and Hailey. Let's do a quick recap. So what do you think we covered? What were the highlights of that previous one we just talked about? Let's hit on some of that, and then we'll get into some of the other topics that you had mentioned. We'll get back into that.
Yeah, I think passion was one of the big ones, wasn't it? That seemed to be a good topic because there's so much that evolves around passion, whether it's the intimacy, romantic intimacy, the physical touch, there's just so much around passion, what you do if it's kind of lost and hasn't been kindled. We talked about taking responsibility. We need to take responsibility ourselves to, reignite that, not just rely on the other. We talked about knowing what we want. We talked about knowing our values. We talked about knowing, having some basic ground rules before we enter into marriage. Just don't go in, like you say, blindfold. Don't go in without having any clue. Really be wise with, your choices. And what else did we talk about there, Hailey?
Lots of juicy stuff. We started the show by talking about the pain that many couples are in and why. And we all cited one of the biggest missings for couples is the training, the skill set, the toolkit, which is available, but it is not taught to us in school. We don't often have a healthy love role model that shows us how to be great as a partner and great as a couple, and so many of us aren't. We talked a lot about recreating, seeing our partners newly, and certainly our self-responsibility for being the best, whole, healthiest version of ourselves that we can be. I think we talked a little bit about being authentic instead of fake, so that fake you isn't dating fake them, and then the masks come off. And really our three perspectives. So Austin is fabulously single and open for love. You are our long distance love marriage, Jim, and I'm our second time lucky upgrade blended family, learning from the mistakes of broken love on how to create healthy love. So we are a very interesting motley crew, and we value love, but we look at it in a way where it can be possible, but not always. So I think we also talked about that disclaimer. Not all relationships are meant to be stayed in. Sometimes it's dangerous. Sometimes it's toxic. So we're talking to those healthy couples who you're in that healthy population, but in disconnection, what we can do to repair it. And so the suggestions we're giving aren't suggesting people stay in abusive relationships.
Yes. And so Mandy is reflecting back some of the things we covered, being true to who you are. We talked about that. Being the best version of yourself. We talked about that. Michelle, expectations once in the relationship, and before too, discussing them beforehand is really paramount to before we go in, but they're important, both sides. This is a great one here. Don't lose your identity while in the relationship. That's a whole couple hours, if not a couple days on that topic.
We did a lot of masculine and feminine, and we didn't mean men and women sometimes. We meant the masculine energy and feminine energy.
Yes, we did masculine and feminine energy. Let's see. let's see, we have don't think your partner is supposed to complete you. That's a huge one. That's I'm making this the relationship light bulb. Whenever light bulb
Sorry,
goes
Renee
off.
Zellweger.
Yeah, sorry, Tom Cruise and Renee Zellweger. It makes for good Hollywood, and we might feel that way, but gosh, please be careful. It's a slippery slope. You don't want anybody to complete you. You want somebody to complement, augment, expand, grow. Think of like expansion together, as opposed to I'm contracted, tight, and closed, and someone's going to come in and fix that, or open me up somehow, and it doesn't go that way. It's like wanting somebody to do all the work, and it just doesn't. Thank goodness there's no cowbell. Okay, Michelle, don't tempt me to bring out the cowbell. We're going to leave the cowbell over here.
Speaking of work, we talked about when relationships get tough is when most people exit them. And then some relationships, the tough spot, it's not a toxic spot. There's a difference, but the tough spot is where the real work comes in. And Austin, you recommended, when you and Jim and I were chatting last, you recommended a beautiful movie, which my husband and I watched that same night. And oh my gosh, love it. I hope you'll share the link with your viewers.
Oh God, yeah. So I came across that movie and it almost inspired me to do one. Like I almost want to do something like that. I have so many things on my board. I get so inspired and excited to reach people with things that are going to change their lives, and relationships is a big one. So that movie is called How Will We Love? And I think the guy's name is Brickler, Tim Brickler, maybe. It was done about maybe a decade ago. You probably remember because you watched it. And it's a great, great movie. It lends so much perspective to the myriad of things that can happen in relationships, and what I've learned on my journey. And I'm not saying that everybody's going to do this, but I feel like to truly love somebody, you must be detached in some way. So what I mean is, I love you. My love for you is greater than my attachment to you, if that makes sense. I think that's very profound, and it stretches beyond, because traditional love, or I should say, maybe
possessive love
is my attachment. How could you love me? And or in other words, if you love me, we're together like all the time, and it's supposed to work out forever. And as we know, it doesn't always happen that way. Somebody may wake up one day, right? Let's be real. Somebody you might love them, you might feel a certain way, but they wake up and go, and they leave, and they don't understand, and they want to walk away. They want to leave. What do you do? Well, if you are doing the work and you love, and you build value for yourself, right? Because self-worth and self-value is really important in a relationship. It's part of our healing. Then when it doesn't work out, or if it doesn't work out, I should say, you'll feel the pain of, but you won't be stuck.
Yeah, you love someone enough to honor that if it's not in their highest good to stay with you, you don't want them to. And there's so much magic in what you're saying, Austin, because this is also the key for deciphering when a relationship is toxic and should not be stayed in. It has to be in the highest good of both people to remain in it, meaning we have access to full self-expression, our sexual orientation, physical safety, emotional safety, financial safety. And if we both can't access those things inside the relationship, if it's good for one but not for the other, it's no good. It's got to be good for both.
It's got to be good for both. Now, I'm going to grab this. So Anilda says, what about the pheromones that play in the relationship, confusing us all? What the heck do we do about this? I'm so attracted to this person, but there's no way it's going to be like, that's what it talks about in how we love it. And I will grab that link and
plug your nose.
Yes. So what do you think? I mean, what if you're like sexually attracted to this person, but you love this person?
Jim, what says the long distance runner of marriage?
Yeah, that's a tough one, because you really have to step back and look at it. I've always taught that if you meet someone and you just go from meeting them to that erotic, sexual love and affection, and there's nothing in between. Like if there's no foundation of friendship or anything underneath that, eventually that's going to crash. That erotic stage is going to crash, and if there's nothing for it to stand and land on, you're doomed to fail. So you really have to look at it. If it's a long-term relationship that you desire, you got to take your time and build that. The passion will still remain, the attraction will still remain, all that stuff will be still there, but you need to build a solid foundation in which for that to build on. If not, then you're just, I mean, excuse me, but we're no better than barnyard animals if we just go from that. Let's just get it, and that's it. I mean, we're no different than barnyard animals. But if we do build that relationship, if we feel that there's that attraction, there's that that connection there, then it's worth building a solid foundation under.
Totally, because we have to decipher between falling in love and falling in lust. And so, Austin, can I share a quick TMI story?
I would love it because I'm about to go somewhere with this too. So go ahead.
When I fell in love with my husband, so this is husband 2 and always, that we just celebrated our 10-year wedding anniversary, 12 years together. We interviewed each other and fell in love over the phone for a month before we had our first date, because we knew that if we fell in lust, that would just be easy and maybe not lead anywhere good. And we wanted to make sure that everything was enmeshed before we exposed each other to those pheromones. So to answer Anilda's question, plug your nose, don't be around them. Spend the time building conversational connection, ask the tough questions. And I mean, Zoom allows us now and all these virtual platforms to have face-to-face without having to have your immune system pick up what theirs is emitting and see, are you a match on, as Jim will talk to you about all the F words, and are you a match on the 16 parts of relationships that I talk about? My husband and I, this wasn't a CIA interrogation. This was a loving discovery process where we spoke like teenagers for 4, 5, 6 hours. And we knew everything about each other's hurts and hopes and preferences and little quirks. I loved him on the phone, and the only missing ingredient was, did we have chemistry? So we made a rule for our first date: no sex. But it was very important to me to spend a night in his arms, being held by him, sleeping, this kind of sleeping together, because I knew I would know, as a divorced single mom, I knew I would know whether it felt like home or not to be beside him.
Wow.
And
very conscious.
Yes, but it's hard because it's easy to fall in lust with people, and it is very confusing. And if those pheromones are dancing, they will dim out.
Wow.
That reptilian brain is going to dim out our frontal cortex of rational thought processes. And this is why sometimes the people that sleep together should not live together. But we had to exercise caution as adults and say, look, we've both been in long relationships before. We've loved before. We've been wrong before. And we want to get it healthy and right this time. And it's just hard to ask the tough questions on a date over dinner. It's easy on the phone. It's easy on Zoom, because if you're awkward, close your camera and go to the bathroom for a minute and come back with your, strong pose and ask what you need to know. So I think we as adults have to put our own brakes on. And I'm glad Anilda mentioned pheromones because they're powerful.
Yes, they are. And this is a great conversation. And that is it. I totally commend you on your approach, but you didn't just wake up and do that. You did the work. You went through a relationship failure. And I know you felt, and we know what that feels like. It's devastating. And you came back in consciously, and now look, you're a living testimony to it. And that's a beautiful thing. You know what came to my mind? I'm a big movie fan, and one of my favorite movies is The Shawshank Redemption.
Oh, that's a good one.
And this is a great analogy, and I feel like this is where couples get to when they finally make it. So the movie goes that Morgan Freeman, he comes up every year for his review to see if he's able to be let out, like on, I guess, what do they call it? Probation or whatever, that probationary period. So every year you see him, he's like, oh no. He's like, I'm a rehabilitated man. I'm ready to fit back into society. And every time they're like, declined. decline. Every year he comes back, he's like, I'm rehabilitated, I'm complete, I'm ready to go back out into civilization, or like decline. And then the one review, he comes up and he goes into this long dissertation, and it's just raw, like from the heart. And he's like, so you just go ahead and stamp your thing and let me get back on into the cell. And then that's the moment that he's let out. He's let out when he just says, here it is, and like, here I am, and this is my life. And he's like, I wish I could go back and talk to that young teenager again and tell him what he was doing is wrong. And it's just this like beautiful raw moment. And I think that's a great little metaphor to when we go back into our relationships. Instead of trying to put on that mask, just come in with that rawness, real, and just be like, it's not attachment. Like, I'm not trying to win you over. I did this thing. I said, I'm not trying to get you. I'm trying to get to know you.
I love that.
Just replace the trying to get the person to the get to know, and all will be well. And if you need to do it the way you did it, where you can't be around them and you're following set guidelines to do the foundational work, I think that's beautiful.
And crazier parts too. I mean, I'm someone that had to overcome a lot of body image insecurities, and a man had never seen me without makeup prior to me meeting my second husband.
Cool.
And he said, for our first date, no heels, no makeup, come in a tracksuit. Like, let's just be who we really are. And if we like each other like that, this is going to be easy. And we definitely don't do that when we're dating. We put on our best, our fakest, our everything.
Mhm.
And I wish more couples could start from this very authentic and safe place. And I do think the pandemic has changed. It's more difficult to feel safe to meet people in person, which has its challenges. But for dating, it's a good thing because it causes conversational gas and physical breaks so that you can get on platforms like this and get to know that person.
So the area that I wanted to go down, and Jim, I want to make sure we honor you here. Did you have anything you wanted to share on this before I kind of abruptly switch gears?
Yeah, no, just slow down just a little bit there. But no, I think just to echo what Hailey was saying, what really sticks out the most to me in that whole process is that there was two people that respected each other enough. They respected themselves, they respected one another, and they had the discipline and the self-control to go through that process. And it's one of those elements. It's one of those characters, qualities that are missing in a lot of us today. Is just that self-control, because we don't have to control ourselves. We can go online and get everything that we want at a click of a button. And we expect the same thing in our relationships. We won't take the time because we don't respect ourselves enough, and we don't respect people enough, because we can just, swipe right and go to the next one. And that's the way, the process of getting to know people has come to. But coming back to a place like that, where you have respect for yourself, first and foremost, respect for the other person, secondly, and you've got that self-discipline and that self-control to actually go through that process, there would be far less dangerous, rocky, toxic relationships if people would slow down and just go through that process, honor themselves enough to go through that process.
Yeah. And it's like, do you want to build something that lasts, or do you want to get something that lasts through the night?
Mm-hmm.
Right. And that's what you did. You went in knowing you want to build something that's going to last. And it would be great if we all had the information and we all had the stuff to go in, but we don't. We think we do. We're just not as conscious. And that's why you're teaching people, Hailey. That's why you bring so much value to the table, because you've lived it, you've done it. And when you've done it and you've walked it, now people may not walk exactly the road you did, but your perspective is going to be a great beacon to show them a better way. And that's so beautiful. And so where I want to shift to is this culture today where it's the exact opposite. Because what about the people who have, I met him, it was love at first sight, and that was it. And today, when I do like my own little personal study on this and the younger culture, there is a subset of the culture that is like really aware, but then there's the masses that they can go online, they can get their needs met, they can get the expectation is we're having sex on the first date. forget the 3 dates. It's like 1 date. And that's like, well, I got to try it out first. I got to see if the passion's there.
I think
that's
love
what's
at first
happening
sight
today.
happened more in a time where we had sight of less suitors. And online has changed that. You can see thousands of people really quickly. So people don't trust their own judgment to say, is this the one? Maybe I should see if there's more out there. There was a time where you met who you met in person and that was it. And if they seemed special and if there was chemistry and those pheromones and all that, people went for it. Now we know that there's so many options and they're easy to find. It can be really confusing for people to label, this is the one.
Yeah. And we've come to the place where we, in society where we really believe that, if there's no sexual attraction, no real romantic attraction, then it's not a relationship. Well, we talked about that earlier on the first
Yes.
show. That was one of the other things that we broke down the 168 hours that we have in a week. And we probably spend, 2 to 4 hours per week having sexual relations. And we think that's the most valuable part of any connection. Well, it's just not true. There's so much more to know about a person than just that. And again, it doesn't separate. There's a fine line if we have that kind of mentality between barnyard animals and human beings.
That's why we need you. That's why we need you, Jim. That's why we need you, Hailey, because we need to get other voices out there that can reach people, because ultimately, unfortunately, it's like the people seem to need to go through that pain. They need to go through the pain.
It's a good teacher.
It taught me, sometimes there's things, sometimes the pain teaches in a way that instruction can't.
Yes.
But
and
again,
heartbreak raises the bar.
But it does come down to that awareness, right? Because if not, you're going to rinse and repeat. And Hailey, you didn't. You drew that level of awareness in yourself in the work that you're doing, and
On
now
purpose.
you've changed it. And
there's something that I did which was terrifying, and I think this is something, Jim and I, all three of us, I know, believe that there's so much value in prevention more than just the cure. It's not just about a couple laying a good foundation once they realize they're two people. It's about us as an individual, when we're single, getting prepared for what love we want to create when we create it with someone. And we can use our pain as a wise teacher to say, what do I not want in a relationship? We don't want to manifest from a negative list. So we turn all those don't wants into a positive statement. I don't want someone abusive. I want someone who's calm-tempered and fair and of high integrity. I don't want a cheater. I want someone who has eyes for only their one partner, who's loyal and faithful. But we have to go a step further. We can't just list the attributes of who we want to get into a relationship with. We've got to actually picture it in 3D and use statements like, the kind of couple that we will be. This is how we'll be in the mornings, in the evenings. This is the kind of work we'll do in the world, the way we'll interact with our families. If we can start picturing, when we're not in a relationship, what a healthy version of relationship might look like to you, helps you know what questions to ask when you're dating someone / interviewing them. But most of us, we just got that list of attributes: funny, loyal, smart, sexy, successful, fit, blah, blah, blah. We're designing like this man bot or woman bot. We're not thinking of the reality of how we're going to interplay and the dynamics together.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I wanted to add something, which I did, and I think it's really important. It's easy to make. I think it's easy to make a list. I mean, even though most people don't do it, it's easy to write down things that we want. But I think where you want to create even more distinction is, what are you going to do?
Yeah.
If that's what you want, who are you going to be? How are you going to show up? Because then you're just not like Santa Claus is going to give you this perfect person. Like, what are you going to do? How are you going to show up?
Yeah.
And I think that's really important. That's where we take that personal responsibility, where we counterbalance what we want.
Yeah. What do we do with it? Sorry, Jim.
Yeah. No, it's great that, like you say, Hailey, to make a list of the attributes that you want. But yeah, that puts the responsibility on the other person. So, the ultimate person that I want in my life has to have all of these qualities, and then I'll be happy, right? but it's like, okay, what are you going to do to match that quality? What are you going to do to be attracted to that be attractive to that person? Okay, so if you want somebody that's funny and witting and kind and considerate, but if you're grumpy and miserable and sour and unlovable, what in what universe is that person going to want you into their life?
Exactly.
So what are you going to do to rise up to match that attribute that you want to have in another? There has to be that compatibility there.
And then we got to get brave, and we have to share our visions. And so, it's funny when I'm writing profiles for someone who's single, they always start with, I want someone who's, all these attributes. And I said, well, and who are you and what are you bringing? And we put that in. But it's when they're describing the vision of this real, loving, beautiful, dynamic relationship that someone comes across that profile and says, what a breath of fresh air. I've been waiting for somebody who's been waiting for this. And we have to get brave. I literally sent my husband all the lists. I said, I've been doing a lot of work on love manifesting, and I don't want to terrify you, but you should know what's in my dreams so you have a chance to run now before it's too late. And I shared it with him, and that's terrifying to say, I'm holding out for creating extraordinary love and partnership where we're aligned in our values, where this is how we'll parent and this is who we want to be in the world. And we'll play some parts of our life, we'll play a big game. And then some parts, we'll play a very minimalist game. I wanted him, I didn't want to wait and see what was going to be popular with him. I wanted him to know that vision and give him a fair chance to say, that's not me. And I think we hold back when we're dating. We respond to what the other person says they want, and then we say something popular that fits in with it. And we don't really reveal our truest desires. And so then we hold those secret expectations. Expectations are dangerous in the first place. And then the person doesn't measure up. And then eventually, if we're passive aggressive, we let the cat out of the bag that there was something we've been wanting for a long time. And your person goes, why did you never tell me? You said you wanted to live in the country. Yeah, well, I was just being agreeable.
Yeah. Or the opposite, they compromise their values. They compromise the things they want to in order to fit in with that person. That, they wanted to live in the country, and they want the person that they're kind of having some feelings towards is, one that's going to want to live in the city. Well, okay, then I'll just compromise that one. I won't pursue that dream. And so we compromise a lot of things. And, I used to teach students when they were younger. I would teach them, you have no business getting in a relationship until you know the purpose that you have, the direction and the calling on your life. Because if your life is going to take you to the West Coast and the person that you're now falling in love with is their calling is going to the East Coast, one of you is going to compromise. One of you is going to fall short of what you're really called to be. And that's the real demise, I think, is that there are so many things that as a society we're losing out on because people are compromising their values. They're cashing in to follow lust rather than love. And then they're not becoming their true person. They're not bringing the gifts. They're not bringing the stuff that they're supposed to be bringing to this planet. And that's the sad part of the whole thing, I think.
And to me, it's like emotional bankruptcy. When you follow that road, it's like you become emotionally bankrupt.
Yeah.
And Michelle is just from an earlier point. I just want to highlight this. People get confused between passion and lust.
So true.
That is true. That is so true. Really good point. We had a couple things we wanted to hit on before we close out part 2.
Forgiveness, expectations, emotional intelligence, and how your worth affects your relationships.
Huge, 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 huge. So why don't we start with, I think we should start with, I was going to say healing, because I think it's foundational. Mm-hmm. And I think it goes back to what we talked about earlier, but maybe from a different perspective. We're going to look at this of where am I in my healing journey? Understanding where you are. And sometimes people get into a next relationship prematurely. Mm-hmm. And if we haven't done the healing journey, we haven't done the work, we might be destined to repeat. Mm-hmm. So what would you say to that, Jim?
Yeah. I mean, because that's where so many rebound relationships come in, don't they? When somebody's hurt and wounded, feeling low, feeling desperate, feeling unloved, unwanted, they'll allow themselves to fall for anything, and you never want to be in that place. You want to be in a place of being the highest version of yourself. And so it goes back to what Hailey was talking about earlier, what we mentioned out of that process of just having that self-control, having that respect for yourself. Say, okay, I need to take a time out. I need to take a time out for me in order to really deal with the whole process of what happened, what went wrong, what was it in this relationship, what was it in the whole process that made it end the way it did, and then begin to evaluate and come to the place of loving yourself, respecting yourself, caring for yourself, honoring yourself, and not compromising. I can give you an example out of my life where I was in a really low place. This was before I met my wife, obviously, and I had quit a really good job. Something that I wanted to pursue didn't come through, and so there I was now without the prospect of this future goal that I thought was in line, leaving a good job, and I was just spiraling downhill. I was really spiraling fast, and I remember I was at a bar one time, and I was leaving the bar, just feeling discouraged and miserable, and just really. And out of the corner of my eye, I saw this girl look at me and smile, and that was it. And I compromised my values. And for the next year and a half, I spent in motorcycle gangs, in strip joints, dating a stripper, doing all that kind of stuff because I compromised my values for that moment, because I thought I wasn't worth anything else. And one person looked at me and said, and just batted their eyes, and that was enough for me. I was caught in a spell, and that was the relationship from hell. It was just a brutal time in my life. But so often people will end up in those positions because they compromise their self-worth, they compromise their values. So, I would say to a person that's gotten out of a relationship or has been into a relationship that's broken, take time and heal. Don't bounce back into it. You're better off to spend some time alone feeling miserable and feeling all of those feelings than to jump into something else and try to deal with those feelings and deal with another relationship, because I can guarantee you it's probably going to be at a lower level. You're not going to find your highest.
Jim, I just want to honor you for sharing that. I really appreciate that, because a lot of times people think, they look on here and they think, oh, that person's perfect. Oh, they got it figured out. But it's the exact opposite, and it's a part of like what I teach with Flashpoint is the polarity principle. Your greatest breakthrough, whether it's your success or relationship, comes disguised in ugliness, failure, like when you feel like it's over, and then boom, there's another side to it. And here's another side to you that I didn't know about, that you went through in your journey, but it makes sense, so that you've lived it. And there's people that are going to do that. They're going to go down that road, and they're going to, satisfy the urges of the flesh, if you will. And, and it's not to get spiritual, but we know that it's detrimental. Like even outside of spirituality, what it does to people's psyche over time. And you study these people over time that just repeat, and what happens to them physically. And it's just, so there's a better way. And I'm glad you were just bold enough to bring that up.
But there's so much hope also in what you said, Jim. I was with some colleagues today. We were launching a book, and one of the ladies, her name's PS, she gave this quote, and she said, "Every sinner has a future. Every saint has a past."
Yes.
And so we aren't static as people. And if you happen to catch us when we're on our good streak, trust that there's been many bumps before.
Yes.
And if you happen to catch us when it's bumpy, if we are aware it's bumpy, we're not going to change for you. We're not going to change because you're mad at us. If we're aware that we're bumpy, we can choose the change. And I love what you shared, because I think sometimes we look at a person who's going through a tough time and think they'll never amount to X. And I know who you are in marriage. I know you as an officiant of marriage. I know your compass points due north. And I think your story actually gives a lot of hope to the parents on the line right now, who might see their teenagers or their young 20-somethings dating badly, hanging out in the wrong crowds, doing things that as parents, they're worried And there must have been some light bulb moments for you when you said, this isn't who I am, and it isn't who I want to be anymore, and it's not who I want to become. And so it's a slippery slope, because if we know change is possible, how do we know when we're in love with someone who's due for a change, whether to wait for that change to come through, or to be outside that relationship and only be in it when their change is complete? And I think we get very confused because Oprah and Maya Angelou say, don't date someone for their potential. But it's hard, because sometimes potential, in your case, Jim, came through.
It is difficult. And, I feel like you can't look at the numbers. You need to level. And I believe, this is Austin speaking, I just believe the more we level up ourselves, the more we grow as human beings, the more we step into our growth, resonate with what's true to our heart and soul, do the things that we love, work on our healing, the more we're going to attract better in our lives and be prepared when it shows up.
Yeah.
And I want to just grab something from Michelle here, because I think I want to hear what your take is on this. And so, talking about the healing journey for the individual, right? What if your healing journey isn't about a past relationship? Does it still mean you shouldn't get involved in a relationship?
So, Michelle, I love your question. I was reading it when it was in the chat before. I'm glad Austin picked it out. If you have healed your paradigms around love, partnering, relationship, but you haven't yet started working out with a personal trainer, you don't need to remain single until you've hit your complete fitness goal. You don't need to remain single until you've made a certain amount of money or got to a certain place in your career. It is the relationship impairing personal growth that we shall always do before getting into a relationship. But we're still allowed to be people on a mission of becoming. We're never going to arrive. There's always going to be some next level thing that we are becoming, whether it's about becoming more or becoming less. And I don't think we have to wait for perfection to get into love, but we do need to wait for wholeness and a healthy mindset about love, about sex, about trust, about relational values. That piece warrants getting healed before mixing with a partner. But if you suffer from anxiety, you don't have to wait until you don't to love. If you've battled some circumstantial depression, you don't need to wait till 6 years of therapy to share yourself with somebody in love. These can be your personal parts of you that you continue to evolve and work on. Otherwise, we would be discriminating against every imperfect human being that they're not right yet for love. So I love this question, because it is a really, it's a really gray area. What do you think,
Yeah, like
Jim?
when do you know? When do you know you're ready?
Sure. And I mean, you can still be on part of your journey, and there's nothing to say that you can't go out and have a casual dinner with somebody or have a casual coffee with somebody, and that you may want to get to know a little bit more. There's nothing wrong with doing that, because that's going to help you in the process of discovering who you really want to be around. I always tell people, you got to start at the list from the top and the bottom. Right, you start at the top. You got the big high list of what you really want, and then you start going out, and you kiss a couple of toads once in a while. Just say, okay, I know I don't want that. I don't want to, and you start to work your way up. And so, I think you could still be on your healing journey and growing as a person, and still get yourself in environments where you're in gatherings with small groups of people, or going out for a casual coffee or casual meal. And just be upfront with one another before you go out, that, hey, I'm not looking for anything serious. I just want to go out and have some company, and there's nothing wrong with that. And because that's going to give you, I think that would help us along the way of the healing journey, wouldn't it? If we just sat down with somebody and had dialogue, had conversation, it would help us to grow as individuals, and then help us to really know what we want.
And there's probably a tiny little switch, because somebody asked in the chat, how do you really know? I think the delineation is, there's a difference between being broken and a mess versus working on it and excited about the future and creating. I think it's healthy when we can self-assess to say, I'm working on it. I am living in my possibility. There's a future I'm creating, and I'm not all the way there. That's okay to put yourself back out there for love. But if you feel broken, that's a good way to delineate and say, I'm not ready to be with someone else until I can love being with me. There's a like slight difference in there.
That's a great distinction. There's a couple things that I want to go back to what I said before is getting to know. The pace of society today is it's quick, get in quick. It's boom, boom, boom. And that's why I don't get on, I'm not on, like, I don't dating apps are not a popular thing for me. I stick my toe in there, but it's just, it's that pressure to get in and be do something quickly versus get to know, take the longer road, because I do believe that's a necessary process to get to know ourselves better, and how we, in our process to get to know others, we learn more about ourselves. And from, I could just share my own personal story. And I shared this before. My model of relationships was bad. It was lots of hurt, pain, depression. And then I'm not aware. If I'm not aware, I'm destined to repeat. So the process of awareness, and that's why I like your continuation, like where you it's almost like you're on the down or you're on the up. You're expanding in life or you're contracting in life. And I think it's in that expansion when you are on that upward tick and you're starting to build momentum, that maybe you get to that get to know. You do more of the get to know, and you're willing to take the long road. You don't have to rush into anything.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Like I said before, Harville Hendrix said, the quicker you fall in love, the deeper the hurt.
Yeah. And I like what you said, Austin, just taking the pressure off yourself. I think so many people would, if they took that counsel, they'd do better. Just take the pressure off yourself. It's when we put pressure on ourselves to find love, to find a mate, to find someone to be with forever, that it makes it terribly uncomfortable and terribly challenging. Where we take the pressure off and just, okay, I'm just going to love myself and love people as I get down, and start to build friendships, build relationships, and allow it to evolve. It just takes the pressure off. I think it would build much more meaningful.
Yeah. And I know, again, I love my life. I love who I am. I love who I'm becoming. And if you love who you're becoming, right? I'm not perfect. Oh my gosh. But if you're beginning to fall in love with who you're becoming and who, in the direction that you're going, you really open yourself up to be a magnet to people and to be a magnet to like people, better people, healthier people. There's no perfect, but that's what we're talking about, the healing journey. I think that's foundational to our work. And I do think that part of the healing could be in what's revealed to us through the conflict in a relationship, because that's where we have the opportunity to do something different than we did in the past.
The shadow work, not so fun, but oh, so important.
Yes. Yes, really good. So forgiveness.
It's a big one.
The F word.
Jim teaches lots of F words.
I know Jim's a master at the F words.
Not that one.
Yeah, all the PG ones.
Forgiveness. My husband and I went through something so hard, and I was standing in a place of non-true forgiveness. And it's when I discovered the work of radical forgiveness and became a master coach in radical forgiveness before the founder passed away. And forgiveness, when we say things to people like just to choose happiness, that's not teaching them how. And when it comes to forgiveness and we say, just let bygones be bygones, let's water under the bridge, just get over it, that is useless, because we're not teaching people how. We're not saying take these 5 steps and you'll arrive at a place that feels a lot like forgiveness. And what I learned inside of that work is only when we get to a place where we can become grateful for having gone through, that there is nothing left to forgive, we have real forgiveness. And I'll use a stark example. I have forgiven my rapist from 25 years ago because that experience allowed me to become a coach and work through trauma and share things that help others share things and then heal from those things.
Wow.
I am grateful for having had to have gone through that so I could be and do who I am and what I do today. And so I don't condone it, and I would never want to experience it. And I wouldn't want anyone in this world to go through it. But because I'm grateful for having gone through, and I wouldn't delete it from my timeline, there's nothing left to forgive. And so forgiveness is a really confusing concept in our world because we think forgiving means condoning. We think it means, if your partner has had infidelity or they've made some financial mistakes, that if I forgive you, I condone this and I invite it back in. Oh, my rapist is not invited over for breakfast. They are not allowed to be in my life. They're not invited back in. So the more we learn about forgiveness, we realize guilt and shame get collapsed if we are struggling to forgive ourselves. And when we're working to forgive someone else, it is not a gift you give them. It's a gift you give yourself to stop feeling like it shouldn't be. The woulda, shoulda, couldas. When we are resisting what's so in our life, we are in pain. And it's not until we go through the forgiveness process that we can get to peace.
I want to stop you right there because that could be worth somebody listening to this. I want you to say that again. When you talked about resist, go ahead.
When we resist what's happening in our lives, what feels like it's happening to us, we are in pain. That is where we are locked in our victim energy. It's where our suffering comes from. But when we walk through the correct process of forgiveness, that is when we can stand in acceptance that for whatever reasons that we might not yet know. I fundamentally believe, Austin, everything happens to make us and not to break us. And if everything, even the worst, happens to make us and not to break us, then there's going to be a gift on the other side of the trauma scar. There's going to be a blessing on the other side of the mess. And when those blessings get revealed, how could we be mad at what we had to go through to reach them? We just need patience in between because they don't show up overnight.
Hailey, thank you.
Yeah.
No, this is worth it for a lot of people, what you're sharing right now. And I want to add some more perspective to this because I think it's really important for people. When I listen to you, metaphorically speaking, it's like you have climbed Mount Everest. You have literally climbed Mount Everest to get to the point for what you just said. And there's a lot of people that are not even at base camp. How can I possibly forgive? And you said that. So I think a lot of people are going to want to connect with you because we can understand it logically, but the process too, we don't know. I don't know. We can give steps, we can share, but I found like the most important thing is to really allow people to build their belief that it's possible for them to get there and give them the space to step and not to say, get over it, forgive. Allow the steps to take place in the way that they will. And so I just want to really, I know people are going to want to connect with you. So I want to make sure we get your contact information because that journey, someone right now is in the valley and they're going, that sounds good, but I don't even know what I don't know. I'm in the woods. I'm still hurt. I'm still dealing with that.
Part of why, Austin, you and Jim and myself were very open about our stories is step one in the 5-step process to radical forgiveness is to tell your story. When we keep our facts constipated, they bring pain. And we need to release those facts to at least one safe person who can hold space for our story. And the second step is to have the feelings. And we often need someone to hold space. And that's usually as far as we go in our traditional world trying to forgive. But the other steps are so much less complicated than we imagine. We just like we talked about in this show, couples would thrive if they were taught the skills. We could be good forgivers if we were taught the process. We can be great lovers if we're taught how. We can be great at business if we're taught how. I think that's the beautiful message in your show is you come online to teach people how to be, how to become, how to have hope, and not just to talk about it, but that there's real tangible things that we can do by watching people who first had to do it many, many times and then they can take your hand and help you do it too.
Yeah, and I believe that strength is in every single person listening. You just don't know it yet. You've been led to believe you're weak, or you've been led to believe you can't heal, or you've been led to believe that you can't do it. And to me, you can. Just as we're sitting here, Jim just shared a story. You just shared a story. Gosh, I felt just, anyway, I won't get into all the details, but just knowing where I came from, just that feeling, those feelings, and I won't get too far into the story because there's more to it, but it's a gift. And I think everybody that I've talked to on this platform, they realize it's a gift. But if you're at this stage where it's not a gift, you're angry, you're upset, you're hurt, you can't even figure it out. There's a way. Like, there's a way for you, and each person on here, Jim, Hailey, is a beacon, that we don't have to go in it alone, that we're powerful when we're in commune, when we're having conversations like this that are open and raw. And that's what the movie, right? There's not enough conversations like this, right? And when these conversations happen, it does create an opening, and it does create healing.
Yeah, and I think a really stark example, which unfortunately all of us are touched by with family members and maybe with ourselves, when there's hurt in love and when we're deciding whether it's here to make us or break us, it is similar to a cancer diagnosis. Nobody wants to hear those words. They are not happy or pleasing or comforting to hear. But there is a choice to be made in that moment, if that's going to be the thing that breaks you, and going into that hole of sadness and disempowerment, or is it going to be the thing that's your catalyst for change? You're going to make the healthiest, best next moves in your life. You're going to value time, people, and self in a whole new way. You're going to shift priorities in a whole new way. And so even something that's as awful and devastating as cancer, for some people, that's the liberation to start making different choices. That's their pivot. And in love, we get bad news like that, and it might look like infidelity, and it might look like a partner who lost their job and didn't tell you. It might look like someone who's going through depression or their own battle, and we have got to be careful in our decision. Are we staying? Are we working? Are we forgiving? Or are we out? I think that's the thing you've done so well, Jim, is I bet there's many times you and Mary had to forgive each other and choose to stay in. And I think it's the toughest decision a couple makes when they're in struggle is, how do we really know? Should we be in, even though it's hard right now? Should we just hop out? Is it safe to stay? Is this disconnection? Is it toxic? But I definitely know my husband and I would not be celebrating our 12 years if we hadn't mastered the ability to forgive, because we're all human. We're going to have days when we're not our best. We might have seasons. We might even have years when we're not our best. And hopefully, as long as our not best is not toxic and dangerous, we'll have somebody be able to hold space for us while we work on us and get back to good, and get to be like you, Jim, and come up on 4 decades.
Yeah.
Almost 40 years, Jim.
This has been nice to, just sit back. I just really felt that moment, Hailey. So thank you for sharing the way you did. And
absolutely,
just to throw my 2 cents in, what I mean? Unforgiveness.
You need to throw your priceless value in. Go ahead.
All right, I'll give you the priceless value. I won't give you just the 2 cents. No, but so often we hold back unforgiveness because like you said, Hailey, we don't feel the other person deserves it, or we don't want to condone what they're doing, etc. But the truth is, unforgiveness is like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die. Yeah. Right. And it's so toxic. It's more toxic to us. And it's like anything else. It starts with that choice. Love is a choice. Forgiveness is a choice. You need to, come back to that place of just saying, okay, I choose not to live in this. There's got to be a better way. And then start down that road to really, having that restoration. There was a story of a young son who was acting up a little bit, and his dad was always kind of reprimanding him. And one day the dad just blew a gasket, and he was just up one side of this boy and down the other side, and his sister, the young guy's sister, witnessed this entire thing, and she became so angry with her dad And she held unforgiveness for the rest of her life until her father passed away. She did not forgive her dad for lashing out the way she did on her brother. At their funeral, the father's funeral, the son and the daughter were standing side by side, and they got talking. They started to reflect, and he mentioned something. The son mentioned something about, loving dad and, respecting him and so on. And she says, "Are you kidding me?" She says, and she brought back that moment when it happened, and she said, "I have not been able to forgive him from that time." And he looked at her and he said, "Are you kidding me?" He said, "I deserved every bit of that." She did not know the whole story. She just based, she formed her conclusion on what she perceived, what she saw, and she held unforgiveness towards her father. And you think of how many people walk through in relationships and in life unwilling to forgive because they don't have the full story. And it's just making that choice of coming, like you were saying, Hailey, and just making that choice and then starting that process to go through.
Yeah. And I want to say that I've seen moments of forgiveness, and it's like a miracle taking place in somebody's biochemistry. And like you mentioned, emotional constipation is one way to put it. There is such a release when forgiveness takes place, and it's like a flashpoint, and it is just the biochemistry of somebody changes. And I think that's where miracles happen, where people's physical body literally changes almost, it seems like almost instantaneous.
Crazy that you shared that, Austin, because radical forgiveness was originally created for a cancer retreat. It was created because a group of about, I think it was about 30 or so individuals were at this retreat, and they were all holding the same dominant subconscious pattern. And that was around, carrying heart wounds, it not being safe to be them. And the work was about releasing the toxic emotional hold that does sit in our body that over time will make us sick. And it, as they say, the issues are in the tissues. If we look at the work from Louise Hay and
Beautiful.
many of the other greats that teach this, I myself had 40 breast lumps when I was standing in non-forgiveness. And a year and a half later, when I went in for surgery, there were no more lumps.
Oh my God.
Because I had done the forgiveness work in between. And it's so powerful how where we hold our hurt is where we hold our sick. And when we can bring forgiveness to it, it's not a silver bullet, that it's not a cure-all, but it certainly gives us a better chance for health and vitality if we aren't holding toxic stuff in. And forgiveness, it's a rinse and repeat. When you've forgiven somebody for something big, that doesn't mean you're not going to get re-triggered or have a surprise memory, and you're going to have to re-forgive. So it's a choice to keep forgiving over and over. And that's a lifelong journey.
It is a lifelong journey because we all have the trigger point. And when my unhealed child triggers your unhealed child, or the trigger, that's the awareness that we grow as a couple. And oh yeah, Mama Mo is on here. Hey, good to see you. I too believe that my cancer was from the trauma in my life. And there's another healed person. And I do believe it. And thank you for sharing that, and I believe that forgiveness is a courageous act, but it is within it. You are capable of it no matter what. You're capable of it. And I do. Someone mentioned Viktor Frankl earlier, and I consistently recite his work, because being in a Nazi Germany death camp, being tortured, losing his family's murdered, and he claims his last freedom, that they can hurt me, but they can't change my they can't control my reaction to them. I choose to forgive. And that last, he called it the last freedom. It's Stephen Covey's. I learned this through Stephen Covey. And that right there is that if that doesn't go to your cell, like to the tissue of the cell and vibrate and say, my God, we can forgive no matter what. Because that's that's one of the most extreme examples that you're going to find. And it doesn't stop with Viktor Frankl. It's in you. It's in me. It's our choice to cultivate it, or our choice to hold on to that injustice, to hold on to it, thinking we're making the other person suffer.
Mm.
And we're
And
just
in our
driving
love,
their heart.
yeah, and in our loving relationships, I think where, forgiveness ties back so much into love is we don't get a say over what has already happened to us, but we definitely get all the say of what we do next about it. And, Jim, you said so many powerful things this evening in both of the live sessions around there were times when you could either lay blame, ask for someone else to change, or look in the mirror and be that change. And so I think Austin, what you've allowed tonight in allowing Jim and I to hang out with you and have these raw discussions. I just want to be careful to always put the disclaimer out for our listeners. If you are in a relationship where it is not safe for you to be who you are, where you are in danger of any kind, where you are not able to have freedom, safety, and self-expression, please note that all of the strategies, the tools, the skills, and the hope stories that we're sharing, they will not make a dangerous relationship safe. And if you are in one of those relationships, we wish you strength as you make your way out and into a better place on your own before you're in a better place with somebody else. But what we have been sharing, it is for you if you are single and wanting to create love, or if you are in a relationship and things are just tough right now. Tough because of problems that are within your coupledom, or problems that are outside of you, like the pandemic, like work situations, like anything, sick parents, struggling kids, whatever is affecting you. These are strategies to use for healthy people who want to build a healthy relationship, and it's just that the tools have been missing. So I wish you, Austin, so much love in your future. I know whoever gets to be your love and life partner, my goodness, that person is going to be one fortunate individual to have all of the energy and soul and wisdom and personal growth you bring. I'm excited for that person to find you, because boy, I think many of us wish our partners would have done the level of personal growth you've been doing while you're single.
Thank you so much for that. I receive it. Thank you.
Yeah.
And I want to grab some shares here. I want to hear from Jim again, and we want to just tie up any loose ends before we bring this to a close. I believe this is going to serve people that are on here, people that will continue to hear this. And I do want to say, just to piggyback off what you said, Hailey, your journey is yours, right? Some of these, I heard a trainer say, some of this stuff will be relevant to everybody, and all of this stuff will be relevant to a few. So get something that's going to help you in your journey, right? We're not talking about everybody's dynamic, your dynamic. There's no absolutes here. Trust your process. Grab something in your journey. There was something here that you needed to hear, and you probably know what it is. Write it down. Take action on it. Maybe you need to connect with Jim or Hailey or myself. Continue with your journey. You don't have to isolate and be alone. You can take a step. And sometimes that step to reach out for help is all it takes. Sometimes to tell your story, like Hailey was talking about, is that first step for radical forgiveness. To let it out could be your first step. And I just want to grab a share here. I think what Anild is referring to is how many times should you forgive, right? I believe that's what that is, right? 70 times 7.
Yeah.
And I want to grab Mandy's share here from earlier. I think this is really heartfelt. So this is what you're pouring out tonight is definitely hitting home. So.
Yeah. Thanks for that, Mandy. That's great.
And this has been a great time. Thank you so much, Mom. I'm glad you caught the part of it. We had a part 1. You may want to go back and listen to that. This was part 2. Let's finalize. Did we miss anything? Do we need to? We just talked about forgiveness, which went a long time.
Expectations.
Expectations, and then emotional intelligence. So maybe we can touch on that, or we can do a to be continued. I'll leave it up to you and the audience. What do you want? Should we keep going, or do we bring this to a close and we do it to be continued?
Austin, how about our best 1 minute on expectations and emotional intelligence?
Okay.
Yeah, because I'm happy to come back and do this again. I mean, I think this is a fun thing. I love sitting down and talking with the two of you guys. This is brilliant. I love what you're doing here. Just to echo what Hailey was saying earlier, Austin, I really appreciate what you're doing here. This is just so good, and it's so vital, so important. And one thing that I would throw out there as well is to remember that you're not on this planet to be a savior to somebody. In other words, you don't have to put up with the abuse and the bullying and all the. There's a level of deciding what you need to put up with. There's certain things that you're going to go through in a relationship that are kind of meshing and helping, learning each other's. But if there's abuse and all
Jim,
that's
you just opened up a whole other can of worms about the woman who wants to tame the bad boy and she wants to fix him and she's going to go after it. You know what I mean?
Yeah. We could do a whole episode just on that.
Right.
We might have to. And Nilda's asking if we can have this conversation once a week.
Well, we'll see. Maybe we can.
1 minute on expectations.
Everything's on the table, as Jim said. Everything's on the table. Go ahead.
1 minute, if I can share a golden nugget on expectations, is anything you keep secret in your own mind is your own fault, and you never have a right to get mad at someone else for not knowing or fulfilling what you did not take time to share and get agreement on. So please, folks, be assertive, not aggressive, and not passive aggressive in your relationships. If you are holding a vision, a dream, a wish, a fantasy, expectation, call it what you will, please take the loving and thoughtful time to share that with your partner and find out in advance if they have buy-in to that, if they share that vision, if they at least support it or are willing to work towards it. Because if you don't share, and what so many people do, unfortunately, us women especially, we keep these secret desires to ourselves. And when you don't fulfill them, we get mad at you for all the years you let us down about a thing you never knew you were even committed to. So let's get talking more. Let's check in with our partners if what we want is shared by them. And the word expectation tends to be heavier, in my view, than vision. Share your visions with each other. Check in and see where you're at.
Beautiful, beautiful thing on expectations. I think it points right to emotional intelligence. So I'll just overlap it, that your emotional intelligence is your ability to show up and be open to whatever the response is. And in spite of your emotional response, because your emotional response is your the key word in there is your emotional response. And if you have a response, go in and seek to understand first. This is Stephen Covey 101. Seek first to understand and then to be understood. I had a good friend. He taught his kids, he said, be a first-time listener. So he taught his children in any conversation you engage in, be the one who listens first. And once we go in with that, because there's how many conversations ensue based on assumptions and reactions before the full understanding takes place. And so how do you gain emotional intelligence? You recognize your emotional response. And a great way to do it would be the moment you have your emotional response, immediately ask a question. Maybe I missed it. I want to understand. I statements over you statements, right? I want to understand. I interpret it a certain way. I'm trying to understand. That's all it is. I want to get to the bottom of this. I had a reaction to it. You can be up front. I had an emotional reaction. That's okay. You're allowed to have emotions. Like, you're allowed to have an emotional response to something. It doesn't mean you're bad. Like to say, oh, I shouldn't have the response. No, I had an emotional response and I need to understand deeper before I move any further. Or I need to take a break for a moment and process. I'm going to come back and I want to talk about this. Are you okay with that? Right. And then just start to cultivate that muscle. And the more you cultivate that muscle, the more you have those conversations, the more you seek to understand, the more you're going to naturally understand the person's expectations, the way they see it, their lens, the way their paradigm. And then we can grow from there. That's probably longer than a minute. So
that's such good stuff, Austin. I just want to thank you for allowing me to come on here and be with you and Jim. I love talking about love with people who are committed to healthy love. So thank you so much.
So Hailey, are you willing to put your contact information here before you say? Good night, because I know people are going to want to contact you, and we want to be responsible. And what I mean is, if we've stoked, evoked, provoked, I want people to have a step they can reach out and not just leave them hanging. So if you have your contact information, I want to make sure you put it. And you too, Jim, if you want your 360 site, whatever works, just make sure you put that in there, because you may get some conversations from this.
So Austin, we can't post in the comments because that's from the Facebook group, but I put it in the private chat for you. My invitation to your listeners is to listen and hold space for them. I always give 30 minutes of free love. And I am that crazy girl who puts out her cell phone number, the real one, to a human, not an automated campaign. And a text message is a way to get this human to send you some love back.
So I have Hailey's information there. I'm going to share Jim. Jim, I'm familiar with yours. Jim's Coach Jim 360. You can get to all his stuff right there. You can email, phone number.
Yeah, even my real phone number.
Yeah,
real phone number. You should all know how to get a hold of me at this point. I trust you do. If you don't, I'll put it in the chat later. I just want to round this out. I thank you so much for this time. We've really poured a lot out here for all of you. Take care of you. Figure out what you need, and continue your journey. We're here for you.
Thanks, Austin. Thanks, Jim. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
God
Yes,
bless.
this has been great. Thank you.
All right. Good night, everyone.